There's all the beloveds, all of my wonderful ones out there, all of the beings who I love so much. So much gratitude for this sacred moment. Oh, I see. I need a little bit of volume here. Crank him up just a tad, not that much. Okay, here we be. Oh, hey. I'm so full of myself in a good way right now, and I wish it upon you. Is this a good vibration? Oh, hit the microphone. Don't do it. Okay. So today we are in this resonance of Ascension Live. Ascension Live happens every Friday on Instagram at 6 p.m. Pacific time. I'm broadcasting live from Sedona, Arizona, which is actually mountain time, but Arizona never does the fall back and spring forward. So there's never any time change in Arizona. So when the time changes in all of the other places here in the U.S., for example, California, spring forward, when the time went forward, and Arizona stayed still. So we're on the same time as California right now. So I just want to give you a little heads up, because I will continue to do these lives at 6 p.m. But when the time changes again, when there's a falling back time-wise, which is right about October 31st or a little bit out, somewhere right around in there. Anyway, then it'll be on mountain time. It'll still be happening at 6 p.m., but it'll be mountain time rather than specific time, so that you have a heads up. So thank you for tuning in with Ascension Live. We always touch in on all things Ascension, the Ascension resonance of who we are, coming back home to remembering our divine nature and walking in the miraculousness of who we are, even while we move through this domain of the physical plane. So be sure and experience my website, Astarius.com. A great number of musical albums there and a couple of books. Most everything that you'll hear me reciting, and when it's poetry, those are selections from my book. I am available for intuitive astrological readings, as well as sound healing transmissions with didgeridoo and vocal harmonics. And so be sure and leave your comments. That's always a helpful thing when you comment. And also, if there's specific something that you'd like me to speak about, put that in the chat, as well. And if you love the information that is transmitted in this video, then be sure and share it forward, so that we have a multiplication of spirit in terms of the insight, and the up-leveling of consciousness that happens. So today's subject is the Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. Mercury went retrograde in Scorpio on the 13th. Relative to this side of the world, it differs by a day in other parts of the world, but the bottom line, it went retrograde on the 13th here, and it will be retrograde until the 3rd of November. Now, when Mercury goes retrograde, interesting things happen, and many people dread the experience of Mercury retrograde. Mercury is that which has resonance with the outer mind, the communication, the methodology, and Mercury is the brain, it's communication, it's commerce, it's connection, it's coordination, it's cunning, it's dexterous, it's eloquence, expressive. All things associated with communication is tied directly into Mercury. Now, Mercury being relative to the outer everyday mind, when Mercury goes retrograde, it means that the outer mind is beginning to slow down. And when there's an outer mind slowing down, then there's an acceleration of the inner mind. So when Mercury is retrograde, intuition can be stronger. The capacity to see through the veils is stronger. The capacity to experience communication with the other dimensionality is really, really strong, during the Mercury retrograde cycle. So the key is utilizing everything that is advantageous relative to Mercury retrograde. So you can up-level your capacity to tap in through the intuition. You can up-level the magnitude of your communication with the other dimensionality, with the angels, with the ascended masters, with God, Goddess, Absolute. All of this is more accessible during the Mercury retrograde cycle. Now, this Mercury retrograde went retrograde in the sign of Scorpio. And so the retrograde Mercury can bring out some of the shadow expressions of Scorpio. Scorpio is passionate, is intense, very strong, intense emotion, magnetic attractiveness. And sometimes it's the all or nothing at all attitude. So this is one of the things that we want to be really mindful of during this Mercury retrograde cycle, to not get caught in an attitude of all or nothing. If I don't get all of what I want, I didn't get anything at all. If I didn't achieve all of what I wanted to achieve, I didn't achieve anything at all. If I did not receive all of the blessings that I wanted to receive, then I didn't receive any blessings at all. This is the shadow of Scorpio. So with Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, there may be a tendency to be tempted to discredit the blessedness that has come into our lives, the blessedness that has come into your life. See, the attitude of all or nothing is that which is minimizing the maximum. See, when you minimize the maximum becomes the minimum. Just like seeing a glass as half empty. That's minimizing the maximum, because when you see the glass as half empty, it's now in the potential of emptying, diminishing. You see, when you see your achievements in life as not all that, when you belittle what it is that you've accomplished because you feel that it should have been something so much greater, again, you are minimizing the maximum. Minimizing whatever the maximum achievement was, whatever the maximum accomplishment was. And in minimizing the maximum, now the maximum becomes the minimum. It diminishes into something less. As I say, like seeing the glass as half empty. So now it's in the potential of emptying. What we want to do instead is maximize the minimum. When we have a maximum appreciation for something that was only minimally accomplished, minimally received or achieved, then that minimum becomes the maximum, like seeing the glass as half full, and now it's in the potential of filling up. So during this Mercury retrograde cycle, make sure, beloved, that you're about the business of giving celebration unto yourself for the advancement of your life. Even if the accomplishment or the advancement seems that tiny, get your magnifying glass out and maximize the minimum, so that the minimum then becomes the maximum. The Scorpio energy is associated with sexuality. Mercury associated with communication. So there may be a tendency to experience communications about sexuality. Now, hopefully and intentionally, may it be communications that come from a more exalted place, healthy communications without judgment. See, because the temptation would be to have judgments around sexuality, maybe judging self for how one has behaved sexually, or judging another for how they're behaving sexually, or judging the partner because they didn't deliver sexually in the way that you wanted them to. And so we want to reach out and call forth the most benevolent energies that we can to transcend the would-be difficulties of this Mercury retrograde cycle. The energy of Scorpio in its shadow expression can be jealousy. There can be temptations to be jealous of another being. If we're jealous of another being because that being has that something that we want, we're unconsciously also jealous of the thing that we want, and in jealousy, we literally push away the thing that we want. Because jealousy is an affirmation of separation, an affirmation of not having. When one is jealous, their attention is not on the having of the something that they want, but rather the not having. A sense of being denied that which one wants. So let's really work to transcend any energies of jealousy. You know, this is a time for investigation. Mercury in Scorpio can be digging deep down into the central core. It's a capacity to see into the hidden places, to tap into the mysteries of life and to bring them to the surface. You know, the time to ask probing questions. You know, the nature and the frequency of Scorpio is mysterious, is secretive. One wants to be careful to not get trapped in secretiveness. Sometimes we become so fearful of another being knowing what the inner essence is of our own being that we then begin to hide ourselves from them, and in the process of hiding ourselves from the other, by default and unconsciously, we hide so much about us from our own self. Cannot fully decipher yourself if you're perpetually hiding yourself from others. And also in the hiding of yourself from others, there is a tendency to attach something being wrong with that part of you that you're hiding. So let's feel the importance of emotional honesty, of sacred guts on the table. Now, one of the things that can help to facilitate that is that this Mercury went retrograde while the planet Uranus was in a very close opposition. Uranus in the sign of Taurus, in a close opposition with the Mercury retrograde in Scorpio. Now, the Uranian energy is the sacred guts on the table, is the frequency that says, I'm going to be me, the whole me, and nothing but me, in spite of what's expected of me. Shadow aspect of Scorpio can deal with sarcasm and judgmental tendencies, being very skeptical and being very suspicious that the worst thing is coming rather than something that one would prefer. If through skepticism and suspiciousness we are giving attention to the likelihood of something that we don't want, then we are unconsciously and by default breathing life force into that something that we don't want. So we want to transcend that tendency. The shadow of Scorpio can be emotional ownership, the tendency to want to emotionally own. Sometimes it's an idea, or emotionally own a person. So during this Mercury retrograde in Scorpio, we might have the opportunity to look at the ways in which we are being possessive in unhealthy ways. But even when we recognize the shadows of our behavior, we don't want to judge those things. You know, don't judge our judgment. Don't hate our hatred. Don't fear our fear. Don't hurt more than our pain. These are temporary human anomalies along the human journey, and all of those negatives will melt away into nothingness and will be blown into nothingness by the winds and storms of time, because only that which is a reflection of divinity is for eternity. And that part of us that is descendant from Creator Almighty unfolds just like Creator Almighty down the corridors of forever. We, like God, Goddess Absolute, have a center that is everywhere and a circumference that is nowhere. There is nothing that can be a circumference that encapsulates us, because we are following the resonance of the universe that is in an eternal state of expansion. And that's the nature of who we are. We are in eternal expansion down the corridors of forever. So even if there is something negative that we deal with, we realize that is a temporary human anomaly along the course of time that will definitely not outlast us. During this Mercury retrograde cycle, we want to look for the advantage within the adversity. We want to look for the blessings in the cursings, or the blessings in the curse, and the way that the stumbling blocks can become stepping stones. Scorpio energy is also self-mastery. We have an opportunity to take a look at, what is the measure of our self-mastery? Do we make our self-mastery a priority? Do we allow ourselves to be guided by our own internal self-mastery? Or are we guided in manipulative ways by the self-mastery of someone else? All is well in the kingdom of this sacred moment. The frequency of Scorpio is also alchemy. So we get to, through the inwardness of the Mercury retrograde, get to look into the possibility of alchemy that is carried by the sign Scorpio. Alchemy, transforming base metals into gold, transforming darkness into light, transforming pain into joy. It's a powerful time. Don't stress out if things are not logistically working out in the way that you would like them to. During this Mercury retrograde, because it is happening while we are at the same time experiencing this big world initiation called COVID-19, there could be an intensification of the sensitivity, because we're already dealing with things in the world that are very difficult, very challenging. But we are meant to be empowered by everything. Every difficulty and every challenge is meant to be a catalyst for the multiplication of spirit within us, the multiplication of love within us, the multiplication of wisdom within us, of bliss within us, of divine power within us. Everything is meant to be servant unto your expansion, beloved, my expansion, beloved. So this is a time that we are meant to tap into the laser availability, the laser frequency availability of that scorpionic energy that has the capacity to pierce through things as well as alchemize, the lower frequency into a higher frequency. But we must be of that intention. We must be of that knowingness that we can achieve this. Scorpio rules the 8th house of the zodiac, which relates to universal assets. In common terms in astrology, the 8th house is sometimes called the house of other people's money. In a higher sense of that, it's all of the money and all of the assets that exist that is beyond what is our own individual money and assets. But it also relates to consciousness, because Scorpio carries the frequency of values, and that value frequency can tap into the domain of consciousness. So if we set our intention with the power and the passion of heaven, then we can gain a greater resonant connection with the frequency of ascension, that dimension of our being that carries the knowledge of all things, that dimension of our being that can walk on water, levitate, raise the dead, part the oceans. There is a seed of all powerfulness within each and every one of us, because each and every one of us is the microcosmic descendant of the macrocosmic, all that God is. Whatever creator is, we are a microcosm of that. And the entirety of the macrocosm is contained within the microcosm, as the entirety of the oak tree is contained within the acorn. The entirety of the flower is contained within the seed. Let us wake up and remember and come home to the absoluteness of our being. It is so, so important. And I see all you beloveds out there. If I don't respond specifically, know that I'm loving you so much. When I get in the stream of the transmission, though, I have to just stay with that and know that you are right here with me, co-creating this transmission, and I am loving you. So in terms of the mercurial expression, some of the creative expressions of Mercury is expressive, talkative, intelligent, clever, perceptive, reasonable, discerning, witty. And then some of the destructive or negative tendencies is and can be slick, nosy, critical, chatterbox, nervous, opinionated, untrustworthy, and unemotional. Whenever we're dealing with anything mercurial, there can be a tendency to not allow the flow of emotionality. Like the signs of the zodiac that are ruled by Mercury is Virgo and Gemini. And both Mercury and Virgo and Gemini can sometimes tend to disassociate from the emotional beingness. We want to make sure that our emotions are our allies. Now, with Mercury, a very mental planet, channeling through Scorpio, a water sign, which is a sign of emotionality, then we really, during this Mercury retrograde cycle, will be looking at the essence of emotionality to a greater extent. You know, it's important that we learn to be and honor being an ocean of emotion, because it is the emotionality that backs a thought, that determines the power of a thought, that determines the lifespan of a thought, the longevity of a thought, that determines the magnetism of a thought to then attract other thoughts of a like nature, formulating a thought tribe until the acceleration becomes so great that that thought then morphs into the manifestation of the intentionality that was backing that thought. But it is the emotional frequency that backs a thought by which the thought gets its power. Just like in one's car, you know, the emotionality of a car is the motor. And that is the very power that carries it forward. The mind is likened to the transmission of that car. Put it in drive, you go forward. You put it in reverse, you go backward. You turn your left signal on, you turn left. See, that's the directionalness of it. That's what the mind does. See, the transmission in a car, which is like in the mind of the car, says, let there be forward motion. But it is only the motor that can say, and there was forward motion. The motor is like the mother and the emotion by which things are carried forth. And so we want to make peace with emotionality. The things I know by what I think are partly good and they partly stink. Not a bad start, but partly sealed truth of the head is half revealed. What was the bid when I was a little kid? If I want to be smart, then learn it by heart. What a dread when I learned it by head. For in all my learning, I woke up dead. How can my truth be alive and real unless it's truth that I can feel? Down the highway of ignorance and strife, mere thinking was at the wheel of my life. Intellect was wheeling and dealing, but now I'm chauffeured by my feeling. I don't mind showing what's inside. We are all one. Why should I hide? When I do, from me I steal, for I can't heal what I won't reveal, and I can't heal what I'm unwilling to feel. So life, mother of all good things, thanks for the wisdom feeling brings. In feeling there is nothing new, except that which I always knew. From stinking thinking to revealing feeling, let's all open up and have a healing. These tones I offer so that we would collectively transmute any and all negative energies associated with Mercury retrograde in Scorpio being opposed by Uranus and Taurus. We bring everything into the benevolence of its divine reality by virtue of the passion of heaven and the consciousness of God that backs us. So we have also the frequency of Uranus that is intimately in the mix of the Mercury retrograde. Frequency of Uranus says, I'm going to be me, the whole me, and nothing but me in spite of what's expected of me. Uranus is the natural ruler of the sign of Aquarius. Many of you, if you know Aquarius, the nature can be quite outrageous. And that also be I'm a double Aquarius, sun and rising. What you see is what you get. The rising sign is the personal marketing plan, the way that one sells themselves to life and the way that one anticipates being perceived by others. The sun sign represents the central core of being and the specific expression of, or version of one's own godhood. Wherever you have the sun, it is the way that you express the God within your being. It's the core essence. But that which we lead with is connected to the ascendant. That's the personal marketing plan. But when, like me, you have sun and rising, you know, in Aquarius, what you see is what you get. I'm quite an outrageous one, in a good way. Sometimes a person said, man, you're kind of weird. And I'll say, thank you. See, that's the nature of that Uranian frequency that will be the full essence of self, no matter what the expectations of others might be or the judgments that come from others. And so it's an opportunity to be the wholeness of self. You know, creative expressions of the planet Uranus is inventive, reformative, strong-willed, outspoken, unconventional, respect for freedom, and revolutionary. There can be a negative eccentricness, a negative sense of being detached, rebellious. See, we could say golden dawn of freedom's wing, goods of the future. Uranus brings, Uranus and Aquarius, love to all as shines the sun, but sometimes awkward in the love of one. So above and beyond there being 12 signs, there are 6 pairs of signs that come together to reveal one another to each other. For example, the negatives within Aquarius are canceled out by the positives within Leo, which is the opposite sign of Aquarius. Like the Aquarian energy can sometimes, in its shadow expression, Aquarian and Uranian, can be detached, aloof, disconnected from the emotionality, capacity to love the whole, but awkwardness in loving the one. So when Aquarius wants to become masterful in the one-on-one relationship, then Aquarius has to draw forth the frequency of Leo, which carries an incredible mastery in the domain of intimacy. But one of the would-be shadows of Leo is the tendency to become overly possessive in that relationship dynamic. And when Leo wants to transcend the possessiveness, then Leo must draw forth the energy of Aquarius, who is the freedom-oriented one. So back and forth they go. Like Aries and Libra. You know, the negatives within Aries, when Aries becomes overly narcissistic or would be narcissistic, you know, then the patience and the cooperative nature of Leo must be drawn upon by Aries to bring that to balance. When Leo becomes overly accommodating to everybody else, because Libra, when Libra becomes overly accommodating to everybody else, then Leo has to, Libra has to draw upon the Aries frequency that says it's important to also take care of myself. Libra rules the will of others. But then the grandest resonance of the will of others represents the will of God. So the highest empowerment of Libra is to allow the will of God to move through in service unto others. And the negatives within Libra are canceled out by the positives within Aries, and the negatives within Aries are canceled out by the positives within Libra. The negatives within Taurus are canceled out by the positives within Scorpio, and the negatives within Scorpio are canceled out by the positives within Taurus. The negatives in Gemini are canceled out by the positives within Sagittarius, as the negatives within Sagittarius are canceled out by the positives in Gemini. The negatives in Cancer are canceled out by the positives within Capricorn, and the negatives in Capricorn are canceled out by the positives in Cancer. And I already said the negatives within Leo are canceled out by the positives within Aquarius, as the negatives within Aquarius are canceled out by the positives within Leo. The negatives within Pisces are canceled out by the positives within Virgo, as the negatives within Virgo are canceled out by the positives within Pisces. If you'd like to go deeper into your astrology, then I am an intuitive astrologer. You'll find access to me via my website, a phone number that you can reach out to look directly through also. Well, thank you so much for receiving this download, and I'm going to just watch to see if there's any questions that pop through, and I'll respond. If I get any other than that, I will go ahead and close the transmission. Let's just a little bit closer here so I can see the screen a little better. Okay, so someone says, I'm an Aries with an 11 soul urge. Thank you so much for sharing that. I support you in all that you are and all that you do. I'm so thankful I received this information tonight. Healthy, wealthy, and blessed. Thank you. You're welcome and infinitely worthy. Any new music coming out? Well, there'll be something coming before very long. There's always some music, but there's not a specific plan. But I think you just planted a seed when you asked me that question, if there's any new music coming out. Any thoughts on how the retrograde period will be ending on November 3rd? Well, first of all, when we look at the frequency of Mercury retrograde, there's a point where that planet is no longer retrograding, but the causation that has been brought forth by Mercury retrograde sometimes has elongated effects, and it can vary. It depends a lot upon what the energy that one brings to it. If one brings an energy of foreboding to it, then the outcome is going to be negative. So it's going to be varying from person to person. There's no universal outcome because everyone is receiving the energy of this Mercury retrograde cycle through their own filter. Okay, what best advice do you give to a Gemini? Thank you so much. Well, one of the things that I would say with regards to Gemini is one of my lines from my Gemini poem says, jack of all trades, baffled by none, lesson to learn, at least master one. So Gemini has this multifaceted capacity to dance with so many different things, and sometimes there's a tendency to overeat the spice of variety. And so what I would say to Gemini is to have, the experience of this great multiplicity of appetite and this multidimensional urge to partake of so many different things, but making sure that there is also a specialization in some important area. And when Gemini wants to draw in the power of specialization, then Gemini does that through extracting energy from the opposite sign, Sagittarius, because Sagittarius is a sign that is a master of specialization. Gemini is a master of multiplicity. So that's what I would say there. Do you have any ritual or preference of flow for the creation of the wands? Well, you have to just follow your own divine guidance on that. When I make the crystal wands, it's just my passion and my creative flow, and I just do it the way that I do it, and I do it in a way that is uniquely me, and I've not tried to pattern after anyone else. And so, I would just say follow the divine guidance within you. and know that there is an all-knowingness that exists within the central core of your being that has to do with the creation of the wand. Oh, well, I just been talking about Scorpio. You said, how will it dance with Scorpio? Oh, and I guess you're asking about the Mercury retrograde. I don't know if you just came in later, but if you did come in later, then you can certainly do the replay, because I, gave tons of information with regards to Scorpio. One thing I'll just reiterate that I think is one of the most profound representations of Scorpio is that Scorpio is the energy of the alchemy, Scorpio and the ruling planet Pluto, the alchemy of transforming poison into potion, transforming darkness into light, transforming pain into joy. Like when one is bitten by a snake, then the anti-venom is made from the snake venom itself. So there's a great power, in Scorpio to be the resonance of alchemy. And someone is asking, Sun in Aquarius and a Pisces rising. Okay, the Pisces rising, well, one, when you have a Pisces rising, sometimes there's a great inwardness. The energy of Pisces turns very much inward, goes into the soul cave, so to speak. There's a great expansiveness with the Piscean energy, and the nature of Pisces and Aquarius is very different. Aquarius is much more forwardly out there, whereas, the Pisces rising will mean that there's a tendency to lead with a little bit of a slower pace than is the case with the Aquarian energy. But some of the grandest availability of frequency through the Pisces is the frequency of all-inclusiveness, the frequency of the oneness of the wholeness. You see, because Pisces is a frequency that is without boundaries, and so Pisces represents the eternal expansion of the universe, and Pisces being the final sign of the zodiac, the 12th sign, represents an ascension jumping point, where you can either start the wheel all over again, or you can rise into a higher something. And hello from Ecuador. Much love to you. I have a great beloved that's just headed that way. So blessed be that wonderful, wonderful land. Love that. Okay, beloveds, I think we're getting close to the completion. All is well in the kingdom of this now moment. I love you so much. I thank you for remembering who you are, where you're from, what you're for, and that you're divine. And so, blessed be the reality of your coming home to yourself, the reality of remembering the wholeness of who you are. All is well, all is well. Aho Ashe Amen Namaste. Hotepen Lakesha Lakin Shalom. Satnam Hariom Rastafari. Our sacred juices are cooked in infinitely expanding Juicefari, Blissfari. Gonna always have many miles on our smile, wiggle in our giggle and tingling in our boots. Laughter ever after and put in our strut, wings on our butt, because we're always rising up. And up at the top, there's room for all. It's just the bottom that's crowded, y'all. And so it is. And so it shall eternally be. I love you with the passion of heaven.